All right, guys, just a little bit after the hour here, and I think we can go ahead and get things kicked off. My name's Christopher Cruz, and I'd like to welcome you to InterVision's Cloud Strategy Summit. I'm the Director of Marketing here at InterVision, and first and foremost, I'd like to say thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. If you're anything like me, I'm sure you're feeling a little bit of fatigue from all the virtual events and virtual meetings, and we very sincerely appreciate you taking time out of your day to join us. It's a lot of effort and work from our guests, and our internal team has gone into this, and I sincerely think that the content we've put together for you is going to be worthwhile and worth your time. But we very sincerely appreciate you carving out time for us today. For those of you who aren't aware, InterVision is a strategic service provider focused on helping IT leaders run, grow, and transform their business through a comprehensive portfolio of technology, services, and solutions. Our expertise as an AWS APN consulting partner, premier consulting partner, combined with a 25-year legacy of supporting clients in their data center, means we understand the cost and benefits of cloud solutions versus on-premise hardware. And we believe this unique perspective is why over 2,500 clients trust InterVision to help them realize their IT vision and make cloud first a reality, no matter where they are on their cloud adoption journey. So no matter how mature you are today in your cloud adoption, InterVision can support you along that journey. Before we jump into the conversation today, and it's an exciting one, I think, I'd like to get a few housekeeping items out of the way. So first and foremost, at the end of each session, there will be a full Q&A, but I'd like to keep this conversation going. So if you want to use your Q&A functionality or the chat functionality at any time to ask questions, I'll do my best to chime in and let the presenters know so they can address the questions, especially if they're pertinent to something they're talking about right there in the moment. So please don't hesitate to reach out with questions. We love to get the dialogue going, and at the end of the day, if we're not addressing your concerns, your thoughts, and answering your questions, then I don't think we're doing a very good job. Also, for those of you who are looking for a recording of this, I've seen a few questions about it already. Early next week, we will be sending a recording of both days to all participants, and that will come out to you early next week. And additionally, for those of you who decide that you want to continue the conversation, if you have a representative, if you have a sales rep on your working with you already, just reach out to them and get that conversation going. And if you don't, one of our representatives will reach out to you with an opportunity to connect to a cloud expert here at InterVision, and you'll probably see that come out early next week as well. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the incentives for today. Of course, we really appreciate you taking time, like we've said, and we want to try to make it up to you as well. So in addition to the content. So for everyone who joins and stays for the day, there'll be a $10 e-gift card sent out to you for lunch today, and that'll come early next week. It takes just a little time to get that going and get it out, but it will arrive to you early next week. And additionally, at the end of the day here, we're going to be drawing for 2 Amazon Echo shows. So you want to stick around till the end of the event when we have that drawing. So let's talk about the topics today and the agenda. But before we get into these topics, I want to talk a little bit about how we came to this point where these were the topics we wanted to cover. Throughout 2020, as crazy of a year as it's been, InterVision's really taken on an initiative to connect to our clients and other IT leaders across the country and really better understand where they are in their cloud adoption journey and what those challenges, risks, goals are in their process, in their cloud adoption. And, with every organization being different, of course, there have been some consistent topics that have sort of risen to the top that we've heard. And our 2-day session here with the Cloud Strategies Summit is really designed to hit on those topics directly. So for today, we're really talking specifically about cloud adoption in a hybrid reality. Most of our clients today, although they have a cloud-first strategy, still have data centers that they have to maintain and keep operational, and often it's core to their business. So that makes things challenging, right? And really, we want to talk about that directly today from a security perspective, from an operations perspective, from a people perspective, changing culture. We want to make sure we hit on those topics. So today, Jamie Lee's going to open things up. He's going to talk a little bit and welcome you guys and talk a little bit about how we got to where we are today and what our journeys look like throughout 2020 and even before to get to where we are today as a leading strategic service provider. Up next after that, Alicia Gaba is going to be interviewing Ron Teeter from Jobvite. And Alicia and I spoke to Ron a few months back, and he shared his cloud adoption journey. It was just a fascinating story. And he's very matured in the process, but he's learned a great deal along the way. And I think Alicia's going to tease out some of those learnings, and Ron's going to share them for you. I think it's going to be a great conversation. And then one of our leading cloud experts here internally at InterVision, Dustin Milburg, is going to talk about cloud adoption and thinking 3 or 4 steps ahead, right? So for all the lessons we've learned and what we've gained, what do you need to be thinking about before you even take your first step in adopting cloud, or as you're taking on each new cloud strategy, what do you need to be thinking about to ensure it's successful, not only in that initial migration, but in the operations going forward? And then finally, closing out the day, I'm very excited. We have a guest from AWS. Philip Winstanley is going to talk specifically about security and compliance in cloud operations in AWS. And he's a leading expert on the subject, and I really think he's going to bring a lot to the table for you here today. And then finally, we'll close things out with the raffle and some closing remarks. So as I've kind of touched on, we really do have a great pool of speakers here today from both internally at InterVision and thought leaders out there in the space. And ideally, we want this to be a 50-50 conversation where InterVision sharing our perspective, but you're also hearing from your peers and thought leaders in cloud. And we want to hear from you again. So I sincerely hope that if you have questions, if you want to have a conversation, please use your Q&A functionality and use your chat functionality. And we will certainly entertain those questions and make sure we get the conversation rolling. So with all that said, I'd like to turn things over to Jamie Lee. And Jamie Lee is our Chief Revenue Officer here at InterVision. And listening to him talk about our journey and sort of his passion for what we do for our clients is really inspiring for me. And I know it is for a lot of our teammates as well. And hopefully you'll hear some of that come out in his conversation today. But he's going to share a little bit about our process, our journey, the lessons we've learned on our way to get to where we are today in 2020, and how we believe we're uniquely positioned in the market to help serve our clients. So Jamie, I'm going to turn things over to you.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, so good morning, everybody. Appreciate you joining today. Hope everyone is safe and healthy out there. I'm excited for the lineup that Chris just went through, and I hope you can join us for the next couple of days, and appreciate you putting your time in. I believe you're going to get a lot out of it. Today, my talk is, as Chris said, is going to center around our path to being a strategic service provider or an SSP, and why that provides you as a client a better outcome versus just working with maybe a traditional VAR or even just a lone cloud service provider or an MSP. So there is a distinction there, and I hope to show you the difference. So next slide. On the 2020 cloud adoption trends, we are going to kind of walk you through what we're seeing out there, what the analysts are seeing, and then kind of trying to pull it in back into how InterVision solves that problem, right? So throughout 2020, InterVision, we've interviewed lots of our clients, our IT leaders across the country to kind of understand better what is their adoption strategy, what are their goals, what are their challenges. And, in some of these conversations, probably no surprise, COVID-19 really accelerated cloud adoption. We had a CIO panel a little bit right into the COVID pandemic. And I don't know, I'm not sure if I can't see him in the audience if Mark Grimsley's on, but he made a comment that I thought was really, really prudent to what was happening. He said, I used to have 400 offices that I worried about. Now I have 18,000, right? Meaning employees that have gone home. So I'm sure many of you have had to look at those challenges and say, how do I adopt to that? How do I adapt to that faster? We continue to hear, and we've heard this for a long time, that the cloud experience gap is real. We've got a lot of talented people within our organizations, but it's the practical knowledge that really challenges us. They've been at a company for a while and they're moving into the cloud. It's not something that they can, just go out and gain experience on. They really have to look for that talent to bring them in, and they're not readily available in a lot of cases. So that's a constant theme we've heard. And then the cloud agility, I think this gets talked about a lot. But if you tune in tomorrow and you listen to my conversation with Taskus, with Sam there, you'll hear something that I think is really interesting. And when you really have a cloud-first strategy and you can react to market changes, and let's face it, nobody was putting a cloud-first strategy in place for a pandemic, and yet Taskus was able to respond to that pandemic because they had a cloud-first strategy. It truly made them faster than their competition, and that truly is what they mean by agility. They could respond to an unforeseen market challenge, and that allowed them to continue the business operation, which you'll hear more about. And I really think that's a distinction. And sadly, their competition wasn't cloud first, and they were kind of tethered a little bit more to their data center. So hopefully through the next 2 days, through today and tomorrow, you're going to hear some of what it really means to be cloud first in that context. Next slide. If you look at the analysts, probably no surprise. If you saw AWS's earnings just recently, they're still growing on a $11 billion quarter at 30%. And that's because, that cloud ecosystem of revenues is just really driving the change, especially when people started to pull back on capital expenditures and really look to say, how can we operate faster? People started looking at changing the model of what they were doing. Gartner is still saying the same thing they've been saying for a while, that insufficient cloud skills are what's going to hold people back, right? That's what's going to challenge them to get to where they want to go. And really, and this is kind of funny, they put it as cloud computing will power the pandemic recovery in Forrester. What we've been saying is COVID really gave digital transformation kind of a kick in the rear, because I think what you're seeing now is people are forced to think different, right? They can't just do status quo to get to where they need to be. So just, giving you kind of our perception from our clients and our panels that we've had to, and then what the analysts are saying. And I think this really leads to the next slide, which is, what is it that, how do I get into a cloud first world? Well, the challenge is it's a hybrid world, and I continue to think it will be for a long time. And I think Gartner kind of lays it out straight here. If I were in a live show here and I can see everybody's face, I ask you all to raise your hand. I'd set up the question a little first and say, who has a cloud first strategy? And 88% of the people raise their hand. And then, but yet the data says 86% of you are still directing your technology on premises, right? So, and we understand that. That's not a surprise. If you look at legacy applications, you look at complex databases, new security policies. I mean, how can you keep up? Security's got to be at the forefront of anything you do around cloud first. And probably the one that stands out even more, which I mentioned a bit ago, is that CapEx to OpEx shift, right? You're going to hear in a presentation coming up here in a bit about the finance plays a big part of this. And I couldn't agree more, right? And sometimes that doesn't become, it's coming more and more pertinent in the discussion about how to get to cloud first. So we also know that it's, these experience these issues too. We've seen them, but we believe that we are in a unique position to help you with this. And I'll walk you through that. So as you look through making cloud first a reality, there's a fair amount of things you have to look at. And for us, if you go to the next slide, Chris, if you go look for us to the InterVision today, for the last 25 years, we've really built some of the most complex technology data centers in Silicon Valley and throughout the country and throughout the globe. So we bring that prowess, and we looked at that, and then we coupled it with 5 companies over the last several years that really were, I would say juggernauts in their own market segment. And we decided to do these acquisitions based on your feedback, based on our clients' feedback. Them telling us that if you combine these market leaders, you guys will be a forefront that allow us to help through our journey. And so, if I went through a couple of them, you'll hear Dustin talk about around managed services, the grow, run, transform. I can't get into the grow and transform if you follow kind of Gartner's methodology. I can't get into that unless you help me with my run part of the business, keeping the lights on, right? That's where the managed service play comes in. We've had, Fortune 50 law firms say to us, I have to, by my clients' regulations, I have to have a DR strategy that, guess what, has to be tested through the year, and it has to work. And it has to fail back in a systematic way that I can operationalize. It's not just set and forget type stuff. We have looked out there. We searched long and hard to find the right cloud company that really was a premier partner, not only with AWS, Azure Gold, really understood the cloud environment, but most importantly, had practical knowledge, had done it a lot. And then when we look for machine learning, it's still, I think, if you look at any kind of analyst report out there, and I'm sure I'd see a lot of shaking heads on this, the top 1, 2, or 3 things that people think is really going to change their business is machine learning. We have an example of that with an EDA customer here in Silicon Valley, where we're giving them insight now into their unused resources through machine learning that they hadn't had before. It's a game changer. Their CFO's doing cartwheels with the data that they have now, and we're going to take this to other EDA customers who've been struggling with this. Guess what? We didn't know that destination when we went into that conversation. We brought the data scientists. They had some experience around these type of workflows, and through that process, we were able to put together, working with the client, a dashboard that gave them that insight. And then the last, with the ever-changing security, people have been talking to us forever about we need to continue to get really, much more mature and much more significant security prowess, I'll say, on top of what you've already had. So bringing in somebody that's worked with DoD, somebody that's worked in commercial and finance, really just helped bring this together. So we've been doing this, though. This has been InterVision the last couple of years, but I just wanted, for those that are new to InterVision, maybe you've known us from one of these companies from before, I want to make sure you have a full picture of what we mean by a strategic service provider. So we go to the next slide. So in this is the way to look at it. If you look on the left, you saw our partners there, AWS, Cisco, NetApp. Really, the data center component of it on the left is the 25 years I was speaking of. And if you look at the right side, that's really the kind of the cloud side. And, combining these has really put, these two components really separates us from what I think out there, what's traditionally either in one side of the bucket or the other. And I'll tell you something really cool. We're pulling from the Accentures, the KPMGs, the PwCs, the SIs. They're running these teams for us, right? Now, here's the little piece of info. You don't have to spend 8 figures with us to get access to them. So, it's not that same price commitment, but you're getting the same talent. And I think those level of certs that we have on the NetApp side or the Palo Alto side or the Cisco, they're the highest you get, right? So when you do that combination, you now have somebody that understands the hybrid world. They understand how to get to cloud first, and they can accelerate that. And you're going to hear that from the speakers in the next couple of days, or today and tomorrow, I should say. So next slide. So really our approach to this is cloud adoption is just our cloud migration lifecycle assurance. We refer to it as CMLA. And really it's how can we help you in any phase of the adoption, right? This is core to our approach. This is a very comprehensive approach. And again, as I said before, there are very few partners out there that are premier, and premier partners, there are very few that have the migration competency from AWS. It's one of the hardest to get. And guess how you get it? You have to show them that you have a methodology, you have a proven process, you have to show them the clients that you've worked with. They have to then validate your work. And then once they validate your work, then a third party comes in and audits. This stuff is not simple to do. But what it tells you as a client is we have the capability to help you in any form of that process that you're looking at. Okay? And so why does that matter to you? Because as you'll hear from like Ron Teeter talk about shortly, we can't emphasize enough that you've got to work with that experienced team in the beginning of your plan to get it right. It can't be just do a lift and shift here and there and I'll get a component into it. Because for those that live in the Bay Area, that's like building the Winchester Mystery House. And if you look it up online, you'll see what I mean. That's not a house you want to build. And so We also have, taken this, we brought it to the analysts. We said, what do you think about this? And they said the same thing. Your ability to support these phases for any client's journey. And I'll talk to actually a couple on what type of phases we're talking about there, and to help manage that operation going forward. And when I say manage it, I'm talking about, you want to do it on your own, we can help you with that. You want us to co-manage it with you, meaning, hey, I just need somebody once a month that I can call, kind of like on a retainer, and make sure that they come in and help me and really check that we haven't gotten anything out of bounds or out of whack. Or you can go to a fully managed. And this is something that we really find unique. I'm not sure there's too many. There's probably, Chris, a handful of people out there that are premier that are working with AWS's managed service, which they call AMS, to add some more acronyms at you. And so we believe that's our differentiator. So if you go to the next slide, I'll break down a little bit more, on how our clients are looking at that adoption. So accelerate adoption migration, right? When I talked about it before, self-managed, co-managed, fully managed, what's cool with this approach is it doesn't have to be all or nothing. You don't have to pick one or the other. You can say, you know what, some of this stuff I can do on my own. My team's well-versed in that. Some of these applications, they get a little more tricky for me, or there are crown jewels of our company, and I want to put them in a fully managed offering, and I want to have AWS and InterVision manage that for me, and I'll get the highest level of security, and it's the most complex, and then AWS and InterVision can leverage their experience to help with that challenging environment. So that's really what we mean by there. Let me give you a couple examples. The second largest school district in the country asked us to build when all the students had to go home, they said, can you build us a CI/CD pipeline for student registrations? And here's the kicker. We need it done in 2 weeks because we don't have time and we need to get this thing up and running. So AWS asked us, AWS pulled us in and said, could you help us with this migration? And guess what? We got it up, and it's now, at the time, last I checked, it was serving 20 to 30,000 applications in a single day, right? So there's the time to market there on the ability that we have. AWS recognized us of that and brought that in. I'll give you a little bit different one, a little more complex, not so much time to market. There's a large cloud software-based company here in the Bay Area that we're working with, basically born in the cloud, right? So you'd think, how would they need help? Well, they bought a company that was using another large cloud provider. And so, again, AWS brought in InterVision and said, hey, could you help us as our partner? We can leverage our strengths together to do this very complex. One database is probably going to take 3,600 hours, maybe 6 months. It's got 200 different line items that needs to go down segment by segment that takes 4 to 6 hours. You get the idea, right? There's hundreds and hundreds of these tasks to make that happen. But, that's just one database. So you can really see whether it's somebody that just needs time to revenue and need to get something fast because something's changed in their environment, or they need something more complex we can help them with. Security is at the paramount here of anything we do. An interesting thing, we've developed the cloud security standard for the state of California. So anything that they do around that it's a recommendation that our security team put together for them. We've done a lot in the federal space and the DoD. I'll just leave it at that. And then we've worked with a lot of large Fortune 50 companies. And one in particular that kind of stands out to me because I think it's a unique story. When we got involved, there was somebody else in there before. We kind of came in to see what we could do to help. They're working with 5 different clouds, right? So can you imagine? Sometimes you're trying to secure one, and our team put that, worked on the policy and the procedures to leverage that cloud security around it. So we believe that security is at the core. I think everybody does too. And CMLA plays a big part in the CMLA approach. Extend your cloud expertise there. We just got signed up to do AWS immersion days, basically a technical EDC for your teams. So we're looking at all the ways that we can bring that expertise to you. We have technical residents that reside at clients' places, sometimes managing a DevOps team, sometimes on the monthly retainer, as I mentioned, or again, to fully manage your entire instance in AWS. So there's a plethora of ways to help you there. And then the last one, And I was talking to our COO, Scott, on this, and really, obviously, operational cost should be a part of anybody's migration story. And part of that is, do you refactor an app to get a more cost-effective way within your cloud service provider versus lift and shift, right? Or how do you pick the right app to maybe self-manage, co-manage, and all that? But also in that, we are working with some really cool, innovative cost processes that we believe will continue to help with optimization. Think of it a little bit like arbitrage and the monitoring. So we know this is something it's kind of standard, but we're actually trying to take it to another level within CMLA. So next slide. So it's great to talk and say, hey, this is what we think we're good at and what everyone or how we feel about ourselves. What do your clients think about you? So we picked a handful of three here quotes that you can really see. And I think the one to pull out of DirecTV is talking about that depth of expertise. And as I mentioned it before, we know that's a challenge. We've heard that from our clients. The analysts have heard that. And really, they brought us in and said, hey, can you help us with the content? We started talking about using other AWS services for them. And really, at the end of the day, like, how can we do this better and give our clients a better approach? So Antonio gave us a nice compliment there that I think really touches on that depth of experience. If I jump over to down to Royal Technology, it's a client that's been with us for a while. They were leveraging our DRaaS into our data center. And then they said, you know what, we need to pivot to AWS. So we helped them with that. They may be on the call. They said, hey, look, in 3 to 5 years, we want to get out of the data center completely. And so we've really helped them with that journey. Another thing that was interesting is they said during COVID, and this is the experience you get with a DRaaS solution from us, is they said it was very important to them to test the business continuity, right? Everybody knows that we kind of set and forget and go, oh man, I hope I don't have to do a test here. And so they asked us to test it, and then we were able to do that and show that. And that's part of the difference between set and forget and a true business continuity strategy. And then finally, the Mount San Jacinto College, which I always get tongue-tied on, is probably an obvious challenge. Hey, I'm going to send home my faculty and staff, and they need to get access to all the apps, whether in the labs or just, in the classroom or whatever. And so within 2 days, over a weekend, we had completed their production environment deployment of 5 applications with AppStream 2.0. And you'll hear a bit more about AppStream tomorrow, I believe, in Kevin Barker's discussion. So AppStream's just got a lot of examples of things they can do for you. It's not just about work from home. You can do VPC sandboxes for your clients to use. You can modernize your software. You can use CAD designs to leverage this tool. So there's just a plethora of things that you can use AppStream for, and Kevin will walk you through that. And then finally, this is the money slide, right? If you take away anything from my talk, I would remember this slide right here. And really, just build it out. This tells you the why of InterVision. It's, our comprehensive approach, as I mentioned, it's talking about the migration. It's talking about securing. It's talking about optimizing the cloud operations, right? Again, as I said before, think about this. There are less than 50 AWS Premier partners in the Americas. Very few of them have the migration competency to go along with it. And virtually none of those partners have the wherewithal, the experience that we bring of 25 years of working with some of the most strategic and challenging data centers in Silicon Valley, right? So that coupled with our knowledge around NetApp and Palo Alto and F5 and Juniper. And in fact, on the Palo Alto, you'll hear tomorrow when Tasca said, that's who you are, our Palo Alto provider. We knew you knew how to get it into AWS. We also brought you in because you could combine those skill sets and give us one kind of seamless partner to work with. The cloud partner they were working with, they didn't have any understanding of Palo Alto. They didn't understand any of Palo Alto automation. So there was kind of like, why have 2 when you can have 1, right? So I think that that's really what separates us. And hopefully in my, Chris only gave me 20 minutes here, but you get to understand our path of where we were and kind of how it's been going over to being a strategic service provider, SSP, for the last couple of years, and how we can help you on your cloud first journey. So thank you, and look forward to being involved here. And again, if there's any questions in the chat that I can help you with, appreciate it. And for those that are clients out there that I haven't seen in a while, look forward to seeing you soon. And for those folks that are joining as new prospects, I appreciate you taking your time. And good luck on the raffle. Thank you, Chris.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. And Jamie, thanks for that very much. And I think, one of the things for me, as I've gone out and been involved in these interviews with our clients and kind of IT leaders across the spaces, it really can't be overemphasized, the expertise piece that you touched on. I don't think I heard a single IT leader say, oh yeah, we've got the expertise we need. It's often what I call heroics, right? You've got guys who have a legacy in the data center and they're ready and willing to learn and they're diving in head first, but they're also trying to manage their day jobs. And I feel for those folks, right? It's got to be complicated. So that's really where I believe uniquely positioned, InterVision is uniquely positioned to help those organizations based on our experience in the data center, coupled with that cloud expertise. So Jamie, I think you did a great job covering that, and I really appreciate it. So we're keep things moving here, guys. This next conversation, I am really excited about it. As I mentioned earlier, Alicia and I spoke with Ron a few months back, and we were just blown away by his expertise in cloud and the level of sophistication that he's reached with his organization in truly being all in with cloud and all the benefits that they've seen as a result. But perhaps more importantly today, what he's learned along that journey, right, is so closely mirrored to what we aim to do as an organization in terms of helping our clients adopt cloud efficiently and securely and cost effectively. And so I'm really excited about turning things over to Alicia and Ron. And so without any more ado, I'll go ahead and make that happen. Alicia, Ron, how are you guys doing?
Yeah, great. Can you hear me okay, Chris?
Loud and clear.
All right.
Everyone.
Awesome. So thank you, like Chris and Jamie have said, for joining us today. Sure hope you can come back tomorrow. I have the unique pleasure of getting to introduce Ron and having a little chat here. I will say he's going to cover a lot of ground. So please feel free as he's going through his story. If you've got a question, oh, wait, but what happened when you guys did that? Or whatever it might be, throw it in the chat, throw it in the Q&A. We're definitely going to leave time to ask Ron some questions. So Ron Teeter, he's the head of engineering at Jobvite. He has, over the past 25 plus years, taken many of roles in software development, engineering, architecture at companies like Disney and Appian. He's got a tremendous amount of experience on-prem, and I would say probably someone who has as much experience as possible in cloud based on how early Jobvite adopted AWS. So really excited to hear about his journey. Ron joined Jobvite in 2013. That was when their cloud journey began. He was able to rise up the ranks from a senior architect to the head of engineering now. And so I think he's got a really unique and interesting story to tell about how the adoption of AWS has gone within Jobvite, his learnings along the way. I know he's going to help you guys see out ahead if you're earlier on in your journey. And I think most importantly, which is it can be elusive, he's going to talk specifically about the outcomes that came from Jobvite's adoption of the cloud. So I think, Chris, you kind of already tied some pieces together in terms of the fact that Chris and I met Ron as we were having conversations with a combination of existing customers and other folks who are out in the industry. And as we learned about Ron's journey, and as we were sharing some of the things that we were working on here at InterVision, there was just such a strong tie between the lessons he had learned and, oh man, if I would have had that sort of thing when I was earlier in our adoption process, it would have made my life easier. But it's also one of those things, I think, Ron, you were quick to point out, but man, you don't know this until you're in the thick of it. Would you agree with that?
Of course, yeah. There's a certain amount of learning you get just by doing it yourself. Picking yourself up by your bootstraps, as they say. You know, we got into a situation where we did do too much outsourcing with another VAR, right? And that ultimately created a situation that we had to, take control over. And so it was eye-opening what we didn't know.
Yeah, absolutely. So what Ron's going to do is he's going to walk you through, give you some background on his journey, and then we're going to camp on, there's a couple of slides towards the end in terms of lessons learned and the outcomes, like I said, and really also the way he views cloud. So Ron, I'll hand things over to you and you can walk us through this journey of yours.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to share our experience with your constituents today. Really feels good to be able to get out and share our experience and tell our story. Next slide, please. Let me start by just doing a brief introduction to what Jobvite is and who we are. Many people know us. Some of your customers are our customers. But Jobvite is a market-leading talent acquisition software provider. We provide solutions that help our customers recruit and hire top talent so that they can build their teams to accelerate their business. And we are just passionate about innovation in this space. The company started in 2005 with the intent to take a very manual, paper-oriented process and digitally transform it. And we continue to look for those opportunities to see where can we take this next, right? Seeking a job is something that everybody does. Everybody understands what it's like to be a job seeker. And we know how frustrating it can be. And our job is really to try and take that frustration out of the process and make it more successful. Next slide, please. We actually do this pretty well. Aside from just being, acknowledged by analysts and our customers as being an excellent service provider, we've actually helped a lot of people find jobs. We've been around for a while, but we've seen a tremendous amount of growth coming out of 2014 and 15. And we've put millions of people to work on our platform. And that feels really good, right? There's something intrinsically satisfying about helping somebody else find a job. Next slide, please. So when we were talking about having this discussion, I really kind of put my thoughts down into what were we doing and what were the rationales for why we made the change that we did, right? We were using traditional on-prem hosting, using a VAR. You have your standard benefits, but it also comes with some challenges that we'll talk about. But then, we had kind of a life-changing moment and we needed a new plan. And I'll talk about why we moved from what we consider to be survival through agility and into efficiency. Next slide, please. So, we started in 2005. One server, one database, nothing to write home about. But we had an innovative product that was solving a problem and it was delivering value to our customers. And as it grew, we needed more help. So, we moved that into a VAR to handle that. We hired remote hands and staff to handle that. And we said, given that level of investment, we really only need one FTE for our side of the shared responsibility. And we'll hire up engineering and product managers so that we can go build great product. And that was really a good thought and an option at the time, especially from the 2008 economic meltdown. We took that opportunity to build a new product, right? Hiring was one of the first things that tanked when the economy went south. So instead of, just sheltering and waiting it out, we actually took that opportunity to build a new product. However, we were having some challenges with our VAR. if I needed a new system, it could be at least 6 days and sometimes a week and a half. We were trying to get database backups from production into the staging environment so that we could do performance and scale testing as well as business continuity testing. And it would take over 30 hours for a fairly small database to be rehosted for us. These kinds of things were just really slowing the business down at a time when we needed it to go fast. And then as the economy started to recover in 2013, we actually started seeing a lot more incidences related to scale and reliability, and their incident response was unpredictable. Sometimes it was world-class, and sometimes we had to try and track somebody down to see if they could, restart a system for us. And it was creating a lot of friction between us and our customers. 7 years ago today, I was actually looking for a job, and I was using Jobvite to look for my job. And it dawned on me, I knew somebody at Jobvite who was the CTO at the time, and I thought maybe I could reach out and just see if they need help. And so, next week would be the anniversary of my interview, and in December, I started at the beginning of the month. December was an interesting month. Next slide, please. Because that's traditionally one of the highest hiring months of the year, is as people are starting to prepare for their hiring for the following year, and we had an economic recovery underway. I think challenging would be the kindest word I could say about December 2013. It's one of those indelible moments in your career that you remember. During the last 3 weeks, we had 3 major database outages due to cluster desync. We had failures of mission critical systems that in our vernacular are snowflakes, meaning there isn't any other system like it. It's totally unique. And in some cases, we didn't know exactly what made that system unique, so rebuilding it was a challenge. And then we had networking issues that were just inexplicable, and the VAR could not explain these, despite waiting for hours on phone calls. The net result of all of this is we had over 100 hours of downtime in 3 weeks. Just try to imagine what that would do to your business. It cost us customers, and it cost us reputation at a time we really didn't want to be having those kinds of issues. We were on kind of a good groove, and growth was moving forward again with the economic recovery. And more importantly, this failure to control the situation on our part opened the door for some of our smaller competitors. They never probably would have gotten a beachhead in our space if we hadn't missed the beat here. So this became a transformative moment for us. This is when operations became an investor and board level conversation for the first time. And I think, that's something that Jamie maybe alluded to earlier, is I think digital transformation is an investor discussion at this point. Boardrooms are talking about this. It's not something that VPs and the C-suite are talking about anymore. Companies are fighting for their survival in their market space only because of what they can do relative to their competitors. Next slide, please. And, you can back up, Chris. This point was really kind of gelling. After the last failure on the 26th of December, we were kind of sitting around going, but we did it right, didn't we? I mean, what did we do wrong, right? Why did this outcome happen to us? And we spent a lot of time reflecting on that and trying to understand what we needed to do strategically to ensure that this never happens to us again. Now, next slide, please. All right. So the outcome of that reflection was we've got to do something immediately for the survival of the company. And we know, we had been exploring and teasing the water with AWS for a while. We knew that eventually we were going to need to make this journey. We'd provisioned an account, we'd created a direct connect, and we had moved a couple of experimental services into AWS so that we could kind of run hybrid mode. Hybrid saved us. I mean, I'll just put it bluntly. We were able to fail over the majority of our application compute tier in a matter of weeks once we understood what we needed to do. Moving the main database over was ultimately the long pole. It took us about 6 months to get ready to do that. And the way we approach this is that the problem is that our engineers are software engineers. They don't know infrastructure. We don't have enough operational expertise on the team. So let's go hire some staff and let's figure out what we're going to do first. Okay, we're going to create some new networks. We're going to provision storage. We have to make decisions about which AWS services we're going to embrace and which ones we're going to defer. And then the goal is, obviously, we're fighting this issue with our VARs being increasingly less competent in managing our main database. And so whether that's a skill gap on their part or a design gap on our part, we have to own that and we need to take control. We made some good choices, I think, at the time, going with SES and S3, using RDS where it made sense, hosting things where it made sense. CloudFormation came a little bit later, and I'll talk more about that on the next section. But we looked at all of AWS's services that were available at the time, and we made an explicit decision: is that something that we're going to do or defer? The goal here being, if I need to rewrite my code, it's going to slow me down. But if I can use something that's cloud scale, it will require less maintenance and support long term. So you have to make those decisions, very carefully. The other thing that we did is we immediately recognized the value of having a partnership with our vendors and AWS, right? Our biggest probably oversight in managing our prior VAR is we didn't have a good relationship with them. And I think that was probably a bidirectional situation. If we had, maybe we would have had a different outcome. But we needed to make sure that going forward, we never let that happen again. We've been collaborating with AWS for years on new services. We were one of the very first people to embrace Aurora when it was coming out. Data migration service, we use that to move our SQL Server database over to Aurora on MySQL. So not only shifting from a hosted to a managed service, but also shifting across database dialects. Very successful, and we talked about it at reInvent last year. So understanding that you have to take control and drive this change is really the message that we learned here. Next slide, please. In 2016, 2017, okay, the business is safe and we've got a little bit of experience. What do we like? What do we don't like? This gave us an opportunity to, again, reflect and say, what do we need to do? Well, we've moved into AWS and we did it all pretty much manually, right? We wrote some scripts around the AWS CLI and we did some things, in a couple instances with CloudFormation by using template generation. But the reality was we had development, QA, staging, and prod, and none of the environments were identical. Each one had been individually crafted to meet the needs of that environment. And so, as we continued to break down our monolithic software into microservices, we had 4 times the problem. And so one of the things that we, decided we needed to do was figure out a way to do our, standardize our environments and then automate this process of provisioning infrastructure. This is when we really started saying, well, we've got an engineering team and we've got an operations team, but they're not really working well together. And so let's formally embrace DevOps and let's see if we can take it to the next level at Jobvite. We combined that with a retransformation using Agile to say, how do we make it sustainable, right? The ultimate goal here was, how do I get the engineers to provision their own infrastructure as needed, right? That was the goal. And it's certainly easier to do today than it was then, but I think we've come a long way in understanding how we manage that. Next slide, please. So then, starting in 2018, we really started focusing on being able to understand the costs that are associated, right? Most people start with well, cloud's expensive, and it's like, no, that's not quite accurate. The bill may be higher at times, but your opportunity cost or your total cost of ownership is actually lower because you're using your staff to focus on the things that are important to your business. I don't ever want to see a PDU or a hard drive or an SSD again in my life. That has no value for our customers. That's definitely something I want somebody else taking care of going forward. So we started thinking about how do we get more cost efficiency, right? And so we started using dynamic workloads because we can scale. We used auto scaling groups, and we embraced the spot market at the time. We partnered with a company called Spotins, which has been acquired by NetApp, to predict where the prices were going to be the best and move our workloads dynamically to maintain lower cost. It's even cheaper than having a reserved instance. And so, thinking about how to be smart about these things really started shaping our thinking. We went through our environments, as I mentioned before, and we made everything as code. So everything that we want to change in our environment starts as a code change going into Git, going through a peer review, and then being merged, right? I think that's, whether that's monitoring change, whether that's an infrastructure change, an alerting change, everything is code. Even the tools that we use in our SDLC are also code. So the tools that drive the change are also managed in code. And I think you have to have that mindset so that you've got the best outcome. Internally, we have this thing that, a value that we say, I code it, I own it. This is kind of what we're working on right now. Engineering is going to take on-call for every component that they own. It's not fair or efficient for someone else to try and diagnose a problem that is in your code, is in your system that you know the most about, right? That only seems to delay the response time. So, we're now going through this transformation saying, if you don't want to get woken up in the middle of the night because an alarm is going off, you need to improve the quality and the reliability of your software. It's not about shipping product features, it's about shipping customer outcomes, right? And one thing that we've actually made some really good progress on this year is understanding that there's a different way to buy software, right? If you're thinking that the bill is what's important, you can reduce the bill significantly. We've cut our costs 30% year over year just by thinking smart about how we buy the services that we operate. Part of that was with the AWS savings plan instead of reserved instances. And the other one is using institutional buyers to get leverage. So think Costco for software, right? It gives you great value for your money, and it can significantly reduce that bill so you can take those savings and reallocate it to something that's more valuable. Next slide, please. So if we take this journey and we look at it in a single slide, what I want to try and do is connect the timeline to the outcomes. And I'm hoping, there's a lot of small type here, but I'm hoping that thematically people can see that when we started with our hire product in 2005, it's really, this is what we did, right? It was a monolithic application running on a monolithic database. As we grew and introduced new functions like our social network job posting and our referral product in 2008, right? we started having to address some of the scale, right? Adding search outside of the database, adding caches to the infrastructure, right? Starting to think about how is this going to scale as we start getting more load. In 2012, we made a significant investment in rewriting parts of the Hire application to make it more scalable and more performant. We also introduced microservices, and then moving things to a central storage off of shared disk on a Windows host were things that we invested in. But again, it's still within that scope of this is the speed the business can move, right? We wanted to go faster, but we couldn't. 2013, we delivered 3 brand new products, and we also saw, hey, we're going to start sharding our data into a NoSQL system and a data warehouse so that we can start thinking about how we scale beyond our single database origin. And this is where we started very first introducing some of the cloud concepts, using a CDN, thinking about having some hybrid capability. The first things that we moved to AWS was actually the search cluster. And then you see through the cloud transformation in 13, 14, and 15, right, that we really made the transition in 6 months. But I have this across that because it's around the learnings, not just the event, that we accomplished in June of 2014. It was by the end of 2015, we understood what we didn't do right. And so we needed to take a different approach. But you can see every single year, more stuff is happening. In 2015, we built a brand new product to extend our feature set beyond just the hiring and qualifying aspects of the process, but also onto the onboarding side. With that came, top-level encryption vault storage and document services so that we could print PDFs to marry back to the physical processes that are required to do onboarding. But those came as microservices. In 2016, you can see that we continue to move forward. What you're seeing in 2017, starting to use some serverless with Lambda. There are use cases that just don't make sense to run a host 24/7. And it's a perfect opportunity for a function as a service solution. We start going even further. 2018, the world had to deal with GDPR. It took us about 6 months to make the product fully compliant, which would have been impossible if we hadn't had the agility that we had gained through this. In 2019, we did something that was a company first. We purchased 3 other companies, each one with their own cloud infrastructure, each one with their own set of products and features. It's an unprecedented scale. I think we went from about 8 million lines of code under active management to close to 15 through that acquisition. We also moved to the AWS Aurora for our primary database. And honestly, we've not had a single issue since we moved a year ago. We just completed moving one of the telemetry databases to Aurora last Friday. And where it took us 6 months to do the first one, it took us 6 weeks to do the second one with an inexperienced staff. And these are kind of when you want to do something, knowing how to do it and having that ability there allows you to move the business faster than you probably think you can. And then finally, this year has been a watershed for us because we bought, we basically are integrating 4 companies. We needed a centralized IDP so that there's a single login for all 4 companies. That was something we delivered in June. We rebuilt the video platform in September to eliminate the dependency on Flash. We've introduced a new version of our intelligent messaging, and we acquired our AI ML partner as well. So we're now at 6 acquisitions in the last 2 years. Everything's fully integrated and functioning normally. And we're now talking about making the Kubernetes containers transition as well. And next slide, if you could advance it. The key here is the cloud transformation allowed us to scale, and the scale gave us velocity. And we are able to move, right? And I want to try to emphasize the title there without reading it at people. We've grown our business 6 times, and we've improved our time to market by 3. And we think we're not done yet. We think that can still be improved. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the lessons. Lesson number 1, get help. We did this the hard way. I don't regret doing it. There weren't a lot of other options at the time. If people think back to where the cloud was in 2013, it was still pretty new and pretty raw. And we kind of grew up as the service matured with it. But there are definitely things we would have done differently if we had known better. And that's where, having companies that can, help you with the seen it, done it are essential to a successful outcome. The other one is think about multiple phase programs, right? Don't try to do one event, right? Our lift and shift was the beginning of our journey, not the end. You have to be thinking about what's going to make this sustainable and supportable for the next decade. And for us, it was, we can't have, I can't hire enough operations staff to grease the skids for the engineering team. At some point, I need the engineers to have the same level of understanding of their infrastructure as they do their code. And so we chose to go this path of engineering will have the tools to to define, design, and deploy their own infrastructure as needed. And then the third one is obviously consistently challenge the business, because you have to make this as a business owner problem. It's often seen as a technology problem, and it's not. It has to be clear to the investors and the C-suite that this will change the outcome of the business. Your agility as a company is your competitive edge. And if you're not moving fast enough, your competitors are going to take your lead. Next slide, please. And that might be it. Oh, no, there's one more. So this is something that Jobvite's been working on internally for a couple of years now. As we've learned through this, you'll have a lot of people talk about DevOps or DevSecOps or FinOps. And the problem is each one of these paradigms is focusing on what's important to the buyer, right? And I think what's important is you have to look at the holistic picture and make that the goal. And so, we call this FinSec DevOps. Just because that's the order in which you need to solve these. You've got to have budget. There's no point talking about deploying something if you don't have budget, if you don't have goals, if you don't have ROI metrics. Same thing with security. You have to know what the endpoint requirements are. You have to constantly challenge your security posture, because the threat landscape is constantly evolving. In terms of development, people can write code, but can they evolve their designs over time? Are you spending enough investment thinking about refactoring so that your code is maintainable and thus it doesn't cost you velocity? And then finally, operationalities. Are you holding the people accountable who are writing this software to the MTTA and the MTTR? If not, when is it going to ever get better, right? And so this holistic paradigm is something that we're trying to expose and get some more light on and start conversations around, because I think this is going to be the next thing that we as an industry need to acknowledge is these aren't separate concerns. That's what made Dev and Ops a problem in the first place, right? If your finance team isn't involved in the decision-making, you're probably setting yourself up for failure. And with that, I will end my discussion and turn it back over to Alicia.
Yeah, so thank you, Ron. This was great. I think we've got time for just a question or two. So I would say the first thing that I'm sure most people are wondering is, if you had to start today, what would that look like? So at the time, it was survival, agility, efficiency. But if you're getting started today, where would you start? How would you start? How would you look at this initiative?
Yeah, I think, one of the biggest challenges that we had was we didn't have as good of an understanding of our own application as we thought we did, right? Because we had delegated how it was deployed, we kind of thought we knew how the load balancers worked, and oh yeah, you just draw a block diagram up on the board, and the reality was, we needed to have a better understanding of how our application's design was actually manifested in terms of its infrastructure. And I think a lot of IT companies have outstanding documentation around that and have good documentation around change control. But generally, I think it's been on the operations side, and engineering's kind of, hey, I wrote my thing and I gave it to IT and it got deployed and everything's good. Having us close that knowledge gap with the team that is responsible for doing the work was essential. And I think one of the things I would do differently is, instead of trying to problem solve the problem, the first thing I would do is educate the team on what it was that we were talking about, right? We had, just weeks of time that we lost because people were trying to solve problems, but they didn't have the foundational understanding of, well, how do I translate this thing from an F5 load balancer to an ELB, right? And somebody would go off and do research, and then 2 weeks later it'd be, yeah, no, they're not the same. We need something different, right? There's just at the time, a general lack of understanding about the capabilities of the 2B environment, right? And a lot of those learnings then came back in to help us re-architect the solution. But I go back to my first point, right? Learn from somebody who's already done it, right? Go out there and find somebody, and one of the reasons I'm glad to be here with InterVision today is, you provide this exact service. And I think it's essential to have a good partner in that journey, so that you're not left scratching your head saying, okay, what do I do first, right? It was obvious what we needed to do first was, we needed to get as much across into the hybrid environment, across into the cloud side as quickly as we could. That's easy for compute. But then we start talking about network routing and load balancing and databases and caches, and the complexity can become overwhelming very quickly.
Great, awesome. Well, Chris is probably going to cut us off right now. You can see him squirming in his seat. Ron, this was awesome. Thank you so much for your time. And Chris, I'll turn it back to you.
No, thank you, Alicia. And we've had a couple other questions come in, and maybe we can get to them at the end of the day. But I do want to honor our agenda only because, I know that we've got lots of other great things to talk about. And speaking of which, I'm going to turn things over to Dustin Milburg just in a moment. But before then, I just want to say a quick thank you to one of our sponsors here today, NetApp. And NetApp, InterVision is a star partner and cloud-first partner with NetApp. And together we work with them to provide a flexible line of hybrid cloud solutions, storage solutions to help meet the business objectives of our customers. So big thank you to NetApp for sponsoring today's event. So with all that said, I'd like to introduce Dustin. And I've had the pleasure of working very closely with Dustin over the last few months here as he's joined InterVision. And outside of his nearly 30 years of experience, I'm handing things over to you, Dustin, here. So let me know if you have any trouble. Outside of his deep experience in engineering and IT and cloud, one of the things that I love about Dustin's approach is that he understands the business outcomes. And he also understands how to apply the technology to achieve those business outcomes. And he can go deep in the weeds and he can pull things back for the boardroom with the same level of sophistication and the same level of clarity. So I think he's a true asset for our organization, and I've already seen how he's helped clients mature in their cloud adoption process. So I'll stop talking here and turn things over to someone who is truly the smart person in the room. And Dustin, go ahead and you can get going rolling.
There we go. Sorry about that. I had a little trouble getting my screen share going. I'm going to get it back up. That was very kind of you, Chris. Awesome intro. I swear I didn't pay him. But yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit today about this concept of the journey to the cloud and the fact that it truly is more important than the actual arrival. As I was listening to Ron's presentation, there's so many things that resonated to me. Is I remember starting when I was back running a software engineering organization. So many of those things, Ron, that you talked about resonated. So just kind of hit squarely on the head of the nail for me. So, but really, this idea that it's truly a journey going to the cloud, and you're never really done. It's a lot like fitness. You get healthy, you're working out, you're eating well. And once you're fit, you don't stop, right? You continue to focus on your fitness and your staying fit. So I would encourage those of you that are kind of looking at this cloud adoption to not think of it as, okay, I'm in the cloud, I'm done. Rather, look at how you can optimize this entire process. And we'll talk about some of the trends that we're seeing from an industry perspective around that. So here's some things that really kind of jump off the page as we talk to our clients and as we engage, the things that are really kind of altruistically present in every account that we talk to. So number one, like I talked about, the cloud is not a destination. It really is about how you organize your workloads and how you optimize them and how you make them more effective and efficient. Ron brought up that FinDevSecOps set of concentric circles there. And I think it really resonates well that you've got to bring all the parts together in order to achieve this journey and continue down it successfully. And so really thinking about it holistically is part and parcel to success. This second bullet, maybe it ought to be first, is that, and I can't emphasize this enough, is that the people and the culture are critical to your success. There's a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt in people's minds around what it means to make this journey and this transition. If you think about it, you're a traditional rack and stack engineer, and now we're talking about moving to the cloud. What does that mean for me, right? One option is I'm out of a job. The other option is I've got a great career opportunity in front of me. I get to shift from being a traditional rack and stack person, and I get to enhance my career towards being more of a software engineer as I provision my workloads as code. And so don't underestimate the importance of the cultural and the people impacts of this. This requires probably the most amount of skill and precision. The technology will take care of itself if done properly, but you've got to get the people aligned behind the work. And organizations that don't take this into account spend a lot of time unpacking technical debt and undoing, a lot of people issues that. So really focus on this, and we've got offerings around this to help organizations make this transition. Tactical alignment around the work generally means yields other tactics that have to follow on, right? So really starting with a strong strategy for your cloud adoption that starts with people at the start of that and focuses on the inputs and the outputs. Where do we want to be? How are we going to measure success? What does success even look like? What are our end users going to expect of this thing after we've made this migration? How do we continually improve on it? So really having a good, sound strategy around this is critical to success. I can't emphasize this point enough as well, and Ron touched on this in his, that you've got to embed security into the design of what you do. It can't be an afterthought. You can't build it, toss it over the wall, and give it to a security team and say, all right, now go secure it. Bring them along on this journey, embed them into the entire process of how you're designing it, how you're architecting it, and how you're going to deliver it. And it will yield not only a more secure environment, but it will also generally yield a better quality product for your end users as well as for your engineers having to support on an ongoing basis. And then architect for the entire platform. We talk a lot about platform engineering here at InterVision, and what we really are talking about there are the 6 components that go into an entire platform. So you've got your infrastructure, you have your application, your data, your policy, your security, as well as your pipelines, how you're developing and delivering it. Those are all part and parcel to your platform. And if you can make this shift as a code base, in architecting the entire platform as a code base, we're generally seeing organizations recognize far more success here. So this is an interesting way to look at the world today. Jamie touched on it a little bit as he was giving his preamble to everything that we're doing. But if you kind of go back to the Gartner model, run, grow, transform, this is not Pac-Man. This is actually a slice of the pie. And in general, most organizations spend a little over 2/3 of their investments on running the operation. And that's a huge investment. Ron touched on this too. When you spend that much, it leaves far less time, resource, energy, money towards growing, and even less towards transforming your business. And this is a theme we're going to come back to in a few minutes. But where we really want to help organizations look at the world is, some of your workloads are on premise, some of your workloads are software as a service, and some of your workloads are in the cloud. In general, most of our customers find that, and most of the companies we talk to, they're kind of in this right quadrant of things. But where they desire to be is more over here. And there's a clear distinction around this. But being in the cloud does not mean that you fully abandon your on-premise strategy. There's a place for that relative to having a private cloud or a hybrid cloud that straddles those worlds. And so, one of the very common problems we see people make is, we're all in, we've got a cloud-first strategy. That doesn't mean just picking up everything you have and shifting it into the public cloud. Instead, a thoughtful approach towards migrating those workloads that accounts for the finances, that accounts for the security, that accounts for the development and the operations together are the well thought out strategies. And we'll hit on some of this as we go. So we talked about this before. This cloud first and the hybrid world is challenging, and the majority of organizations have a cloud first strategy, yet the majority of the workloads are still in the data center. So what does that look like relative to how you strategically plan your cloud strategy, and how do you make these shifts? Right, we have to account for everything in this, right? You've got a really broad spectrum of operating systems, and you've got bare metal infrastructure, you've got virtual machines, you've got huge amounts of data that you have to account for. And then organizations are struggling with this need to make a shift from CapEx to OpEx. And it's not an either or conversation. If we really take a strategic look at this, we can account for all these things, but it requires good planning up front. So as we're looking at what it means to be cloud first and how we have to account for all these different areas, leaders in an organization are trying to straddle this tightrope of, hey, how do I make sure I've got good quality products? How do I get to scale and meet my customers' demand and provide an experience that delights my users, but still stay ahead of the curve and do it securely and manage costs? But by the way, I still have to innovate and have a space for transforming my adoption of digital today. This is hard. And, it's funny, many organizations, and those of you that are technology leaders out there, I hear this phrase very commonly. Well, when we consult with the business, and I put air quotes around business, and I would encourage technology leaders really to think about what happens to the business if technology is not part of the business, right? What would happen to your business if your entire technical team went on PTO for a month? It would come to a halt. And so organizations today need to embrace this concept that, hey, the business is about the technology and the technology is about the business, but we have to account for all these inputs and successfully measure the outputs of it. And so doing this in a really resilient way is really the tightrope that I think most organizations are having to walk today. So if you have a cloud first strategy, a lot of organizations have made the big mistake of just picking up, lifting, shifting, and it's like step one, go to the cloud, step two, profit. It doesn't work that way. And so where we see a lot of organizations engaging us is, hey, we went to the cloud, now we're trying to figure out how to operate in it, how to secure it, and how do we keep our costs under control. And I would go back to that. I mean, I might borrow Ron's Venn diagram from here on out of those concentric circles and that FinDevSecOps. Yeah, you have to account for those things up front. Otherwise, you're continually working uphill. And so, at InterVision, we've taken a different approach, and Jamie touched on it a little bit with our cloud migration lifecycle assurance. Rather than work uphill, a more sensible approach is to work downhill. And so really strong strategy and planning up front. What are our goals? What do we want to see as the results of making that shift to the cloud? So you have to include cost, performance, security, the operational excellence, as well as the customer experience and all of that. What are our inputs? What's our architecture today? What skills do we have? Where are we at gap? And again, I put culture in here. You've got to account for the people and the shift of making that transition and what impact it has on them. And then do your gap analysis. All right, now I know what we want, and I know how we're going to measure it, and I know what we have today. So then how do I cross that chasm on the people side, the process side, the technology side? How do I get to a sound architecture that really scales and enables me to grow? And then how do I measure that success, and what impact is that going to have on my culture that then feeds back into how I continually iterate on this? From there, you can really get the architecture. Like I said, more often than not, the technology will take care of itself. You employ really smart people for a reason. They're gifted. They know how to figure out these problems from a technology perspective. But understanding what tools you have to work with and how you're going to measure success is part and parcel to your architecture. From there, you can determine what makes the most sense. Do I go to a microservice strategy? Do I care? Is this an application I'm going to be retiring over time or transforming? You can get the right architecture that makes the most sense for your business. And then we can measurably deploy and scale out the application for operational excellence. This is all about communication, feedback loops, and continually iterating on your success. So the other thing that this does is, and we go back to this, cloud does not necessarily mean just public cloud, right? Having a hybrid cloud or even a private cloud. Once you get this figured out, your workloads can run anywhere. So this enables you to really embed your legacy infrastructure into this journey, if that's what your organization desires, and that's one of your goals and inputs. So, but figuring this out really helps you architect for scalability regardless of where the workloads live. So we talked about our cloud migration lifecycle assurance, but our adoption model really enables us to meet you where you are. So one option is kind of self-service. Hey, I have a discrete problem or project that I need to have solved. InterVision, can you help me? Absolutely, we can. So this is our approach to, hey, help us out with these very specific needs that we have. And maybe it's look at our architecture. Maybe it's, hey, help me put in a secrets management infrastructure into my architecture. Or maybe it's even help me code this thing or replatform where I am right now. So a self-service model allows you to leverage InterVision based on the needs you have at any given point in time. We also have a co-managed approach, which a lot of our clients are finding very, very helpful, where we kind of come to the table together, we architect together, and we provide support. We can guide from the side, we can lead from ahead, and we can become basically an extension of your team. And so this is a great approach for organizations that may be in the middle of their transition or are looking for support as they start this journey. We also have a fully white gloved approach, which is a fully managed approach, where we can manage from stem to stern your entire migration and then support it ongoing. We're a premier partner with AWS, and we also are an AWS managed service provider. So a lot of customers are finding high value hey, InterVision, I want to turn this over. I don't want to have to worry about it. Can you help me by not only getting me migrated, but also managing it ongoing for me so that my staff can focus on the critical stuff, which is the innovation, the grow and transform part of the business. So cloud migration lifecycle assurance, we talked about this. Jamie highlighted it in his preamble. It's not just about migration, it's a critical component, but having the right inputs to plan for that migration, get it right, understand what success looks like. Once we're there, how do we operate it successfully, and how do we measure that? How does that feed back into how we optimize around the cloud? And then that optimization continually improving, managing costs, managing security, innovating, growing, transforming. That's where organizations want to spend their focus. And so our cloud migration lifecycle assurance enables you to be able to take that approach holistically. The outputs of that are, we get rid of a lot of migration stall. We have a number of clients that we've worked with that have said, hey, we started down this cloud journey and then we reverted. And we talk about, well, what got in the way of that? And you kind of go back to those 5 bullets I brought up at the beginning, those trends. First and foremost was not having a good strategy around it that involved the people and the culture as well as the architecture, and thinking about what it means to get there successfully. So avoiding that stall is costly, and not only from a dollars perspective, but it's also costly on your staff. It's costly on reputation. So we want to help you with that. Improving the security of this. And I talked about this in my bullets, like embed that security by design into the architecture of what you do. And then obviously keep your CFO happy, right? Don't throw good money after bad. Really focus on where the strategic spending is and reduce spend that is not necessary. So we talked a little bit about this. Jamie highlighted this. We really are built for cloud first in a hybrid world. So having these competencies in these areas that are not only focused on the migration, but embedding a strong DevOps culture, DevSecOps, DevSecFinOps. Ron, thank you for that. Is part and parcel. Thinking about where the data need to live and what is your storage architecture? How do you make those transformations into a true digital world? So we've got over 80 vendor technology relationships in the cloud. We're extremely strong with the leaders in these spaces, strong technical certification, and heavy emphasis in our organization on engineering. We're very heavy from putting our expertise on the right architecture and technical solutions and hiring the right kinds of people that want to help you make that transformation. So our methodology is...
Sorry, Dustin, just real quick, about 5 minutes out here. I know you've got a lot of great things to cover, but if you want to breeze through anything that maybe is, iterative or redundant.
Perfect. I'll hit that 5 minute mark for sure. So our methodology is pretty salient here, right? We start with a really strong underpinning of consultation and professional services, and then follow it up with ongoing support. So we talked about our methodology starts with strong discovery and analysis to get the architecture right, have your right foundational planning, and then you go into the build. The migration then takes care of itself. And this operations, we can't underscore this enough, that it feeds back into how you optimize. This is an iterative process, by the way. We don't just get to like I said, it's a journey and it's an ongoing journey. We continually iterate on this. And so we want to be part of that journey for you all the way through, and then continuing to help you optimize that. So our approach really takes a number of different phases. We can help you relocate workloads. We can help you rehost them. Relocating is really about, just like we talked about, lift and shift, move them from data center into a cloud. Rehosting, maybe you look at taking things off of bare metal and move them into virtual machine environments, or you leverage infrastructure as a service. Maybe you don't want to be hosting database servers, but you just want to be able to manage the data. So look at database as a service. That's a good example there. Replatforming. How do you then take and migrate your platform components into cloud services? So consuming those native cloud services components as part of your platform. Re-architecting, maybe you swap out some component of your application. And then refactoring. We have a lot of organizations, Ron talked about this. How do you take a legacy monolithic application and move it into cloud-enabled and optimized services? So we go to immutable, portable and ephemeral workloads. And all those have an impact on time, cost, and agility. But regardless of which option you choose and the one that makes the most sense for you, because not all workloads are created equal, we have a service engagement around that to help you make that migration sensibly. So we talked about our migration service, our managed service offering. You know, those of you who are familiar with AWS's managed service today, you understand what that exists, what that consists of: the landing zone, the portal, the automation. None of those things go away. What we're doing is we're augmenting it at the same level of service that you're used to from AWS, plus additive services from InterVision. Right? You have the added knowledge and benefit of our work and experience with other customers that help you look at how you optimize around these other areas. And so, you know, leveraging us as your managed service provider, I think, provides a ton of added benefit. And if you talk to our customers, they're absolutely seeing it. So if we go back to this, where we started here, this run, grow, transform, this is where the majority of the organizations are today. They are spending the majority of their time and money and effort in this run area. So in order to make this shift, and what the cloud has really done is change the thought process away from, you know, operations and infrastructure to a consumption-based model. You know, what we're doing here at InterVision is really helping organizations think about what's the right model for me, and how do I make this shift in a manner that is based on what my needs are, and is going to help me reach my goals. Then I can determine what's the right premise for me to run on, whether it's on premise, it's in the cloud, or some hybrid model thereof, or maybe it's multi-cloud. And then what's the right technology that supports it? Like I said, the technology generally takes care of itself, but if you start with the technology and then kind of work your way back up, it's a far more arduous journey to track. So by focusing on it this way, we're helping organizations make the shift to run, grow, and transform in a more balanced manner by focusing on these three rights: the right model, the right premise, and the right technology. So the focus on the journey, we talked about this at the beginning. This is never done, but if you focus on the journey, what we're helping organizations do is accelerate their velocity, measurably improve the agility with which you get to your destination, or get to your benefits measurably. We're increasing security by embedding that as part of the design of what we do and how we provision those workloads. You get there more efficiently. You know, you're keeping your CFO happy. We talked about that. Optimize your workloads so that you can consume more effectively and efficiently. Generally, you end up improving your quality as well, right? By starting with the right strategy as part of your inputs, and you provide a customer experience that delights. So I'm really grateful for this time today. I hope this was helpful for you. I look forward to joining you on your cloud conversation and the journey. And thank you for your time and enabling us to work with you. Chris, I'll turn it back over to you.
Dustin, thanks so much. Sorry to have you accelerate there at the end. I'm going to go ahead and pass things over to our next presenter, Philip. As I'm switching things over to him, I'd just like to take a moment to introduce Philip and of course, thank him for joining us today. Philip comes to us from AWS, where he is in security engineering, focusing on managed cloud offerings. He has a long background in security. Prior to AWS, he was with Microsoft for nearly a decade, where he built out a cybersecurity consultancy group focusing on secure development. Philip's worked with the UK's National Crime Agency as a special officer combating firearms, narcotics, human slavery, child exploitation, and other serious organized crimes. Philip has also served in Her Majesty's Royal Air Force in the United Kingdom, where he was a cyber specialist with the Joint Cyber Unit defending UK's critical infrastructure and citizens at home and abroad. So Philip's here to talk to us today about improving security as part of accelerated data center migrations. So Philip, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you so much for joining, and I'm really excited to hear your presentation.
Thank you, Christopher. Can I just check that you can hear me okay?
Loud and clear. Thanks for checking.
Excellent. So thank you for that introduction. I really appreciate it. It's been fascinating listening to the last two sessions. I've watched the sessions today and something jumped out at me. And that's the way in which lessons learned by people moving to the cloud are so important. Right at the very beginning, Jamie touched on cloud skills and how they are so essential to being successful, but also so very hard to achieve. Often you have to fail before you get to the point that you've succeeded and have those skills. Ron specifically called out the journey his organization have been on, their pain points and what worked well. And two particular pieces jumped out at me from Ron's session. The first was avoid the event. Don't look for that big bang, huge migration. Just start with something small and start iterating on it. And the second thing that Ron said that really jumped out at me was learn from somebody. Take advantage of other people's mistakes, other people's lessons learned, and then drive those into your journey. And then lastly, Dustin highlighted how important security by design is. It's so difficult to bolt security on after the fact. You have to start with a secure foundation on which to build and move your cloud assets to. So I just wanted to say thank you to all the speakers. I think that it's been great having that layered approach to seeing the journeys that they've been on. And with that, I'm very conscious that I'm standing between the audience and the raffle, which is a dangerous place to be. So good afternoon. I would like to welcome everyone to today's talk on improving security as part of an accelerated data center migration. As Chris mentioned, my name is Phil Winstanley. I'm a security engineer here at AWS, specializing in AWS managed services. And over the years, I've been involved in several data center migrations, both as a resource assisting customers and whilst working in the enterprise IT space myself. I've been on your side of the table, delivering on these migrations as much as I have helping other people do that as well. So let's start with, what does improving security mean? In this case, it starts with that one question from your security and compliance teams. Is the cloud as secure as our own data center? And if that resonates with you, you are not alone. Organizations everywhere have security challenges. In the recent AWS Cloud Security Report by Cybersecurity Insiders, when asked about the biggest cloud security threats, organizations ranked misconfiguration of their cloud platform as the single biggest challenge for them at 49%. And then unauthorized access through misuse of employee credentials and a lack of proper access control came out at a whopping 46%. These concerns are real and they exist within organizations that are out there. Chris, I can hear you typing. I don't know if you need to be unmuted.
Sorry, I think that's another participant. I'll get everybody muted.
No worries. Thank you. Here at AWS, security will always be our top priority. AWS has been architected to be the most flexible and secure cloud computing environment available today. Our core infrastructure is built to satisfy the security requirements for military, global banks, and other highly sensitive organizations. AWS uses the same secure hardware and software to build and operate in each of our regions around the world. So all of our customers benefit from the only commercial cloud that has had its service offerings and associated supply chain vetted and accepted as secure enough for government top secret workloads. This is backed by a deep set of cloud security tools with more than 200 security, compliance, and governance services, as well as other key features. And approached correctly, and this is key, approached correctly, cloud migrations are a great opportunity to improve the security and stability of your existing applications. Many organizations are looking for guidance on how to meet their security requirements, whilst moving at the speed that the cloud enables, something that Ron alluded to earlier, the velocity that the cloud allows once you get into it. To achieve this, customers need a secure foundation to move their workloads and applications onto. That security by design that Dustin talked about earlier on. So what do we mean by a secure foundation? Customers often try to configure everything perfectly in the data center before they migrate their first application to the cloud. At AWS Managed Services, we've observed across many customers that successful migrations establish a secure foundation in the cloud landing zone and then iterate from there. We think it's important to establish a secure foundation in your cloud landing zone and then refine and improve your security as you grow. To that end, AWS has unmatched experience, maturity, reliability, security, and performance. Internally, we've got a saying, we say that there's no compression algorithm for experience. And that's because you can't learn certain lessons until you get to different milestones as part of your scale. So when customers utilize AMS, AWS Managed Services, they start with that secure foundation. We deploy a set of resources in the form of a management plane, which is managed by AMS on behalf of the customer, including shared services, networking, security, and logging capabilities. We also work with our customers to then deploy a data plane, which is protected and monitored by the management plane, where customers deploy their workloads and applications. This combination allows you as a customer moving to the cloud to focus on what matters most to your business, whilst AMS and their partners like InterVision focus on that secure foundation and ensuring that you have everything you need to stay safe and secure in the cloud. The secure foundation ensures that customer workloads start in an environment designed to keep them secure, and then works in tandem with the AMS shared responsibility model, which I think you heard Ron allude to earlier on, to delineate roles and responsibilities. Now, if you look at this architecture on the screen at the moment, we have the shared services account, which hosts things like our endpoint protection security. So thinking about antivirus and endpoint protection within the cloud. The networking account, which has connectivity back to on-premise environments and out to the internet if so desired. We have security accounts, which have things like Amazon Guard Duty, which is a wonderful threat detection system that I thoroughly enjoy, probably more than I should, using. And then we have a log archive and aggregation system, whereby everything from any account is pulled together into one central place to allow you as an organization to get access to any logs at any time instantaneously and be able to use any correlation tooling or any querying tools that you deem appropriate to help you dive into those logs. Log management is one of those often forgotten about capabilities, but it's one of the things that we make sure is in place as part of this secure foundation. The shared responsibility model, this is something that's incredibly important to get your head around when it comes to cloud, because it changes the way in which you think about technology, skills, expertise, and what you need to do as an organization. Customers who take a pragmatic, risk-based approach are able to innovate and move workloads more quickly to the cloud. The organizations that migrate fastest start by understanding the shared responsibility model. And it really is key. If you take one thing away from my session today, please get your head around the shared responsibility model and how that fits with you and your organization. So in the shared responsibility model, AWS takes responsibility for delivering security controls that might have been the responsibility of customers operating within their legacy data center. That allows customers to concentrate their activities on the security controls that they remain responsible for. The modern security capabilities provided by AWS make this much easier. And think back to the diagram I showed you previously. Now, in this diagram, you can see how the customer data and applications up at the top, highlighted in blue, are where you can focus your efforts on the workloads that matter to you the most, whilst the layers underneath, covering cloud fundamentals, compute, storage, database, networking, all the way up through the network layer into encryption, operating systems, and other platforms, is the responsibility of AWS, AMS, and their partners. Given all of that, the most effective and efficient way to migrate is to move workloads to the cloud as early as possible. After workloads are moved, You can experiment with the security upgrades and new security capabilities available in the cloud. This lets you migrate faster and consistently evolve your security approach. So the sooner you start focus on applying foundational security in the cloud, that security by design, the sooner you can begin refining and getting comfortable with cloud security and making improvements to your existing workloads, whether they be legacy or new greenfield solutions that you're building that are going to be cloud native. For example, we recently helped a customer migrate servers from their on-premise data center. And some of these were older legacy systems that had been around for some time. And they weren't sufficiently hardened to the Center for Internet Security, the CIS benchmarks, which is a pretty standard piece that's out there. The customer could have attempted hardening on-premise before the migration. That would have required them to spin up dedicated infrastructure, bring in resources to actually manage that infrastructure, get it all set up within their data center. Generally a quite complex and costly resource-intensive proposition. Instead, we worked with our partners, and with the customer worked with AMS, and we migrated their application to the cloud as it was. We took snapshots of the servers and then ran the snapshots on an easy to deploy, low cost instance of Amazon Elastic Compute Cloud, Amazon EC2. And then using those snapshots, we ran scripts to harden those servers and brought their security scores up to over 90% against the CIS benchmarks, which for those of you that have tried performing CIS work in the past, you'll know is a relatively difficult task to achieve. So using this method to migrate, let the customer migrate their existing system to the cloud incredibly quickly, and then test the hardening methods against the snapshots. If the application hadn't run properly after the hardening, it wouldn't have been that big a problem. The customer could have continued running on the legacy operating system whilst fixing the issues at their own pace. Fortunately, in this case, and in the vast majority of cases, their applications ran seamlessly on the hardened snapshots of the original operating system. Now, the customer switched to the hardened infrastructure without incurring any downtime and with none of the risks or costs of trying to do it in their own data center. So migrations really are an excellent opportunity to uplift the security of your infrastructure and your applications. It's often more efficient to try migrating and break something rather than attempting to get everything right before starting. As Ron said before, avoid the event. It's such a beautiful phrase. I'm going to steal that, Ron. Thank you. So for example, if you've got a dependency on legacy protocols such as SMB v1, the customer can try and fix that earlier as part of their migration, and then bringing those solutions into their environment without those dependencies in place. The same is true for servers that might be missing required endpoint security. AWS professional services, partners like InterVision and AMS, help customers identify these risks during their migrations and then help them isolate and mitigate them as an integral part of the migration. So you get seamless adoption of your workloads from your on-premise environment up into the cloud. Now, in most cases, it's possible to migrate even a small application to the cloud early. It'll be more efficient and less costly than waiting until all security issues have been addressed before migrating. And in some cases, moving to the cloud can identify existing security issues which have not been uncovered. We recently worked with a customer in the medical space that was performing a very large data center migration into the cloud. And they had a mixture of older legacy workloads, which had to remain as they were, as well as more modern, actively developed workloads. During migration, our operations team spotted a new set of servers which had been brought in and then just been migrated that day as a batch. Were exhibiting unusual CPU behavior. because we're actively monitoring and looking for what's going on within the environment. The operations team performed an investigation into what was causing the CPU spikes. Now, often this can be rogue processes or an update that might have got stuck in a tight loop, which just need to be resolved. So generally, our operations teams can go in, resolve the issue, and then back out and get the customer off and moving again with their CPU back down to a sensible level. However, in this particular instance, it was discovered that the CPU spike was being caused by crypto mining software on the customer's workload. Now, as that's not a normal workload for our customers, our operations team immediately escalated to security and to my team, and a security event was initiated, a security incident response event. My team worked very closely with the customer, and we established quite quickly that this wasn't, in fact, malicious activity, which might seem a little bit odd given that it's a medical company. But instead, it turns out that the application team within the organization was experimenting with Ethereum and blockchain, and they'd forgotten to disable the system prior to the migration. So we ended up with a crypto mining capability running in the cloud that was captured as part of our migration process. So I think it's fair to say, robust conversation was had by the customer with their development and security team, and the software was disabled, and it was agreed that the incident was resolved. Now, that kind of partnership where our operations, our security teams, our partners come together and using that secure foundation that we have in place, which allows us to run strong monitoring, logging, auditing, alerting, and all of the rules that go around that, as well as the incident response capability sitting on top of it. That hand-in-hand approach with our customer allows us to improve security whilst we're migrating existing workloads to the cloud. An incredibly powerful story. Now, a secure foundation isn't just architecture. It's also services and processes which support that architecture. We have invested heavily in 5 key areas from a security point of view, these security pillars, which we deem to be the most important points for running and operating in the cloud. And there's a lot there. I mean, if you look at the screen, each one of those is a large program of work. It's a good piece of production activity that people need to perform. But the key is to set priorities appropriately. Reviewing control objectives early in the process is absolutely essential. Many on-premise data centers operate on security policies that are 20 years old or more. Legacy policies often clash with current security best practices. Think about passwords, they're a great example. Or lack the ability to take advantage of security capabilities that are native within the cloud, because the cloud offers so much rich tooling and services that just isn't available on premise. Now, those legacy policies often clash with the best practices. And it's really important that you can map the objectives of the cloud capabilities that you have and how they can provide opportunities to meet or exceed existing security policies. Often we find that just by our customers moving their stuff from a data center into the cloud, the security bar is automatically raised. It's automatically more secure than the environment that it was hosted in. Now, it's not always the case, depending on the control objectives and the frameworks that an organization might have. They might need to bring some of that control framework with them and implement additional policies and controls within the cloud. But it's certainly the case for the vast majority of cases. And because of all of that, it can also help you identify what's critical to fix right away. So in many cases, controls can be retired. Existing controls can be retired because cloud security makes them irrelevant. I'll give you an example. In AWS Managed Services and AMS, privileged credentials such as local administrator and pseudo passwords are either randomized or made unusable via policy. Now, that entirely removes the need to manage and control those types of credentials, something that often on-premise, people spend a huge amount of time and effort into protecting local administration credentials. Another example would be our use of AWS Directory Service for Microsoft Active Directory, which reduces the risk of exposure of domain controllers because there aren't any in that regard. The traditional domain control doesn't exist in that way within that model for the resource forest, and automates activities such as patching for those domain controllers that would otherwise have been there, and removes the need for privileged access, domain admin, to go and manage and maintain those systems. All of this is just for free from the cloud in that regard. By using AWS Systems Manager to automate common operational tasks, 96% of our operations are performed via automation. Now, that's a huge number when you think about it. It significantly reduces the need for humans to access any infrastructure. And that's one of the well-architected design principles which you can go and find on our website. Now, it's also important to address the people and process aspects of security. Although the cloud can improve your security posture, you should implement current security best practices to help mitigate new risks that might emerge in the future. Migration is a great opportunity to think about the skills gap that you might have and to refresh and practice your security response process, to take advantage of the increased agility and automation of security capabilities in the cloud. At AMS, we welcome every opportunity to simulate security events with our customers and with our partners as part of joint game day activities, allowing our teams collectively to practice responding to security events together so that the day that it does happen, we're ready and we know how to respond. And I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to be ready to respond to security events when they happen. It's a very important piece. Now, my Vice President, John Brigden, he recently said in the blog post that traditional centralized IT prioritized security and control over speed and flexibility, outsourced IT can exacerbate this problem by adding layers of bureaucracy to the system. The predictable result was the massive growth in shadow IT. And many of you will be in organizations where you're aware of pockets of shadow IT, where the marketing department have gone out and signed up for Salesforce on a personal credit card, or where someone spun up a private website on a third-party host for a particular marketing campaign or some sales event. Shadow IT is becoming pervasive inside organizations that don't have good strategies around this. The cloud-native role-based solutions, such as AWS Identity and Access Manager, Amazon CloudWatch, AWS CloudTrail, these cloud-native services you see on the screen, they work together to enable enterprise governance and security with appropriate flexibility and control for users. You can use native AWS and third-party services, third-party security services rather, to inspect and harden your infrastructure. And more importantly, you can get a feel for security operations in the cloud, how things change, how they stay the same, and what is no longer a concern because cloud is a different paradigm. So when it comes to accelerating your migration securely, let the cloud do the heavy lifting. Don't try and do it yourself. Now, next steps. To learn how using AMS to operate in the cloud can deliver up to a 243% return on your investment, please go and download the Forrester Total Economic Impact Study, which you can find at the URL on your screen or via your partner contacts. This concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions you might have with the time that might be remaining, and I'm conscious again that I'm standing between you and your raffle. So with that, all that remains for me is to say thank you very much for your time today.